Welcome. My name is Mary Lou Shawman, and I am a board member of the society, and I am pleased to welcome you today. I think everybody loves old and new pictures. This is not a preservation lecture like we saw it in the fall, where everything you see that's ruined is now new again. The digital presentation is called Sidewalks Through the Centuries. It's the Historical Society's tribute to the 275th anniversary of Carlisle. We created, Jennifer and I, Jen is the archivist at the Historical Society, and I am the museum chair, but I've been writing about Carlisle and its people for decades. So I thought this would be a good way to celebrate the 275th anniversary of Carlisle, since I'm not going to be around for the 300. The black and white images come from the Historical Society's extensive photo collection, and they were taken between 1860 and 1920. In all, the project includes 175 photos of Carlisle, and contemporary images come from photos that Jen took recently, and also from Google Earth. As you watch this, you'll see the houses and buildings that were demolished to make way for the construction of Carlisle's many churches and many schools. But I think you'll be surprised to see how many buildings are still standing, even with later alterations, but they're still there. Today's program features a selection of the 175 photos, because if we wanted to do 175, we'd be here for a couple hours. And what we're going to, this is a special presentation taken from the one that we created online. And so Jennifer is going to show you, before we leave, exactly how to get to it online so that you can watch it at home, at your leisure, in your PJs if you want, and with a bowl of popcorn. We'll begin on North Bedford Street and work our way down Bedford Street to Pomfret Street. So just sit back and enjoy. This is a slide of the southeast corner of Bedford and North. The image in the middle of the picture is a log house that was kept as a tavern by Duncan MacDonald as early as 1764. He came with a Scottish regiment during the French and Indian War, and he just decided to stay in Carlisle. So this was the tavern. Early on it was called the Sign of the Ship, and when he died in 1777, his wife renamed the tavern the Sign of the Highlandman, and I would have loved to have seen that tavern sign. She leased it to a succession of tavern keepers. By the 1870s, the house you see on the right was owned by the Hall family, and the old log house was now covered with weatherboard siding. And W. Newton Hall built an addition to the house, which you can see next to it. He built that in 1888. It was used occasionally as an ice cream or a frozen custard shop. The building was to be demolished in 1899, and Mrs. Hall, ever an entrepreneur, decided to sell the logs to people because this had become known as the Molly Pitcher House. And so she sold logs to people who wanted a little bit of Molly Pitcher. So the house was torn down in 1899, and the picture on the far right is the building that stands there now. And I remember, in the 90s, and maybe some of you do. I believe there was a tailor there who used to do a lot of alteration work for the barracks. Our next shot, when I first saw this, I thought, where is this in Carlisle? I just don't recognize anything, but this was taken on Bedford Street at Locust Alley, and you're looking down towards Wilder Street. The little weatherboarded house on the left is what quite a few houses look like in Carlisle. Little 1.5 story houses, possibly covering a little log house. The brick building in the middle was a livery at the time, a livery and a stable at the time this picture was taken. And it was previously a brewery warehouse. And the little house next door, the little one-story house next door is a blacksmith shop. Now, all of these buildings were torn down in 1897 to build this. No wonder I didn't recognize any of those. Did any? Well, I was going to say, did any of you go to Penn School? But I think that was too long ago. No. Further down on Bedford Street, we come to Andrew Kerr's old nail rig. He made many of the nails for the county's buildings, etc. And he also, there's a receipt that he made the nails for the McManus house on East. So he made the nails for the McManus house on East Street that has a little date stone in the front of it. Well, his buildings were bought in 1916 by Joseph Morris, who was the proprietor of the millinery department of Imperial Department Store. And in 1916, he tore down all the houses, the stone houses, and built these five brick houses. The frame house next to it, right at the edge of the image, is almost across the street from Bedford Street Antiques. This is a lovely view. This is looking down South Bedford Street from East High Street. And look at those lovely trees. It must have been very shady and cool on this street in the summer. The building on the right is the Duncan Stiles house. It was built about 1911 by Judge Duncan and his wife for their son Stephen and his bride. The building on the left is the Gardner Machine Works. This used to be the lot where General William Irvine lived, a beautiful stone house, and I've seen a letter that talked about their wonderful garden with apricots in it. Anyway, that was torn down. This big building was built, and you can see a sign protruding. I don't think I can just do two things at once. You can see a sign protruding from the side of the Gardner Machine Building, and it says Volunteer Printing Office. And the American Volunteer Printing Office was there from 1895 to 1899. This building, along with most of the buildings you see on the left-hand side, were demolished in 1900 to build this. Now, I think this poor tree is given enough. It should go join all the other trees that used to be there. The next image is just a little further down South Bedford Street, and it was taken in front of the Cumberland Fire Hall building during the 1889 Firemen's Convention. You can see the fire engines out front waiting to parade. The fire engine on the left is the Mechanicsburg, Washington Fire Hose Company. And you can see the arch at the back. Do I dare try this? Oh, look. The arch at the back says, "Welcome, firemen." Thank you. Yes. So, the fire company building with its steeple sat on the corner of Liberty Alley.
Microphone, Mary Lou.
Thank you.
Do you want the stand?
Maybe I should have a stand. Then I don't need to. Thanks for bearing with me. Fire companies moved around a lot in Carlisle. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, thank you. So this sat on the corner of Liberty Alley, and the building is still standing, but this is what it looks like now. The tower's gone, and, you know, it's too bad. But anyway, the Cumberland County Bar Association building has been in there since 2003, and the gray brick building across the alley from it is sitting on the end of the Duncan Styles lot. Now we're going to go to East Pomfret Street. Carlisle, I love it. Carlisle has the old jail, the old courthouse, the old cemetery, and way back when it had the old town mill. Now again, when I saw this picture of the mill race on the left, I just couldn't figure out where this was. But anyway, the mill was running in the 1880s, the 1890s. You see the brick house next to it? That's where J. Rudy Bixler, who ran the mill, lived. And in 1895, he gave up keeping the mill and was concentrating on his dairy. So this is where the mill stood. So when you go to Giant and drive past this, you can think of the old mill and the mill race. Now we'll head west on East Pomfret Street. I'll tell you, as a researcher, I certainly wish the founders of Carlisle would have picked different names for the streets, because the boundaries of the old town are north, south, east, and west. And it's very confusing when you're trying to say, oh, it's the south corner of northeast on... Yes. So we'll continue on Pomfret Street. Known as the African American or the African Church, the congregation built a 1.5-story brick building on the north side of Pomfret Street in 1828. Then they built a second building here in 1867. You can see the current picture on the left, but you see in the old picture, along the side, you can see a little corner store, which is, you know, Carlisle was filled with little shops and corner stores in the fronts of houses, etc. In May 2009, the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission placed a marker in front of the church, noting its significance. It reads in part, among the earliest African American congregations located west of the Susquehanna River. It was the site of Underground Railroad activity and abolitionists John Peck and John B. Vashon were members of the church. We'll move further west. And I might add, when you look at this, what we're seeing is just about a third of the buildings in our 175 picture presentation. So there are many more things on each street than I'm showing you. But as I said, we didn't want to take 2 hours of your time. This delightful view with this weeping willow is the corner of East Pomfret and South Bedford Street. This picture was taken about 1860. The German Lutheran Church is on the corner, and next to it, that big brick building next to it, was the Hamilton School. It was named after James Hamilton Jr., who gave the money in his will that eventually created the Cumberland County Historical Society, but he was a big proponent of free education and was on the school board until he died. The school was built in 1868, and until schools became co-educational, this was the girls' high school. And the building next to it with the pent roof is interesting. I wish we could see more of it. Well, that was then, and this is now. The steeple's gone. Hamilton School is gone. The church, the German Lutheran Church, was built in 1854, and in the 1890s, for several years, it was St. Paul's Church before they moved to their new church on Lowther Street. But over the years, it's housed the Third Presbyterian Church, the Red Cross, and quite a few other organizations. It's been there for 172 years and still counting, so good for it.
Mary Lou, could you go back again just for a second to kind of reorient us to the previous photo? Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Next is one of my favorite views. Now you're standing in the middle of East Pomfret Street looking towards Hanover Street. You see blurred over on the left-hand side some little girls standing in front of the house. You see these tall steeples, and these are the steeples of the second Presbyterian Church. You'll see the first one later. And as I said, you're looking towards West Pomfret Street, and the tower that you can see at the rear is the Empire Hook and Ladder Company. Excuse me. I have to use a script because if I don't, I get way off track. And I'll start babbling, which you don't need. So anyway, so we're going to cross Hanover Street to West Pomfret Street. Does anybody recognize this?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, and you recognize it because most of it's still there. The hook and ladder, let's see. The building that you see over here on the left is still there. There's the Empire Hook and Ladder Company, and the two houses next to it, you see, have had mansard roofs added. Past the Empire Hook and Ladder Company is a stone building that has been for years a barber shop. The tower was removed when they added an Art Deco front to the Empire Hook and Ladder Company. It's absolutely beautiful. When you go by, try to look up and see the beautiful facade. Now, here's a house. When I saw it, I thought, I don't know where that is. It's beautiful. Isn't that magnificent? A magnificent Victorian house. And I thought, where is that? Well, it's on West Pomfret Street. It was advertised for sale in 1866, and they said this beautiful brick house with a beautiful back end to it, and it had all the modern conveniences of gas and water. About 1870, attorney Samuel Hepburn purchased the house. He lived before that on East High Street near the jail. There are a couple big brick houses there, and the picture that you see is his wife and 4 of his children at that house. Well, here is what happened to the house. Oh, I need to say that when Attorney Hepburn died in 1890, the building was sold to Dickinson College, and they turned it into a woman's dormitory called Lloyd Hall. And then after that, it was apartments, and then after that, it's this. Yeah, what a shame. For my last photo, we're going to move to the first block of West Lowther Street.
Parking lot at the church.
Now, when I saw this, I had no idea where this was either. Think that you're at the post office and you're looking across the street, and this is what you would have seen. The picture in the middle is what you do see. Now, the picture on the far left, those 2 lovely brick houses. The brick house on the right was built about 1811. Christian Homrich, who ran the tavern on the corner of Lowther Street and Hanover, bought the property, and he built the house on the right about 1811. And then the house on the left, he built a little after 1838. And from 1858 until 1859, it housed the Carlisle Female Seminary. He sold the other lot next to it to the elders and deacons of the German Reformed Church. And they built this. It looks like something out of a fairy tale, doesn't it? There are several churches built during this era in Carlisle that look like they could be in some Disney movie, as where the Rapunzel was stuck up in the tower or something. In the 1920s, the church relocated, and it was replaced by this 4-story building you can see right here with red tiles on the roof. You're just down the corner from the Minute stop. I mean, Pitt Street is just down that way. But anyway, every time I drive past that, I think of Southern California and the red tile roofs and that were put on houses in the 1920s. This building is this. A story was added, and the front was used as a business. This gray building is still there, and it was this originally. So again, there are many, many places that are still standing over the years. And Jen is going to take over now, and she's going to talk to you about the photographers, a little about the photographers, and then she's going to take you on another tour of buildings in Carlisle. Jen? Thank you for bearing with me.
So to kick off my half of the presentation, I want to take a moment to introduce you to the local photographers whose work made this entire project possible. To give you a quick layout of who is on the screen, the top middle photo is a young A.A. Line. On the top right is Charles L. Lockman with his photography equipment. And the man sitting on the desk here is Charles Himes on the bottom. The bottom middle is John Nicholas Choate, and that small image right in the center shows Line again later in his life. We don't have a photo for Colonel Sharp, so you're seeing his military enrollment card on the left. So operating between the 1860s and the 1920s, these men documented the exact downtown blocks we walk past every day. Recreating their shots meant trying to see Carlisle through their eyes, matching their perspective, scale, and framing as closely as possible. So I'm just going to briefly go over each photographer. First we have Charles Lockman. He operated around the time of the Civil War and captured some of the earliest known views of Carlisle between 1859 and 1874. His work provides a rare window into the dirt roads and early brickwork of 19th century Carlisle. These scenes were captured on stereo view cards, which are now preserved at the Library of Congress in the Robin G. Stanford collection. Outside of Carlisle, he was known for documenting the ruins of Chambersburg after Confederate forces burned the town in 1864. Next, we have Colonel Thomas Sharp, who provides a really unique perspective because he was a career military officer. A Newville native, Sharp began his military journey during the Civil War with the 7th Pennsylvania Reserves. He later served a long tenure as captain of the 17th U.S. Infantry and seeing action out in the West and serving in places like the Dakota Territory. He eventually moved back to Pennsylvania, and while we don't have a portrait of him, these images on the slide show the incredible post-war streetscapes he captured before he passed away in 1970. Third on our list is Charles Francis Himes. Born in Lancaster County in 1838, he graduated from Dickinson College, earned a PhD in Germany, and then returned here to Carlisle to teach at Dickinson for 3 decades until he retired in 1896. He picked up photography in his 20s, amassing a lifetime collection of local streetscapes, historic documents, and scientific images. He served as president, secretary, and librarian for the Hamilton Library Association, where he and fellow photographer A.A. Line actually started what became the Cumberland County Historical Society's photo archive. Next is John Nicholas Choate. Choate is known for his 1876 Beauties of Carlisle series, which he shot using a mobile, horse-drawn studio to capture area businesses and streetscapes. He's also widely recognized for his work photographing the Carlisle Indian School and its students. The collage you see here shows several town buildings and streetscapes that Choate documented before his sudden passing at his West High Street home in 1902, capturing the distinct architectural character of the town at the turn of the century. So for our final photographer, this is Albert Allen Line. He was born in Cumberland County in 1850. He learned the trade apprenticing with Charles Lockman in 1869, and he spent his whole life here in Carlisle. He served as both director and secretary of the Hamilton Library Association, and his lifetime collection of 300 glass negatives donated after his death captured everything from early museum artifacts to community outings during World War I. He was out working until the very end. Despite failing health, he spent the last week of his life photographing tombstones of the old graveyard before passing in 1928. Now that we've met the 5 eyes behind the lenses, let's jump back to the streets of Carlisle to see how Hanover and High Streets have changed over the years. So first we have an A.A. Line photograph that shows a Carlisle building with an incredibly rich 19th century history. Built in 1815 by silversmith George Hendel, it became the sign of General Washington Tavern in 1816 under Joseph Augenbaugh, before serving as the home of Judge John Bannister Gibson in the 1820s. As we move on to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it became a hub for local merchants. In the left-hand photo from circa 1876, A.A. Line caught it while LT Greenfield Dry Goods Store was operating on its ground level. When you look at the contemporary perspective on the far right, it's amazing how much of the original 1815 character remains intact, though you'll notice that the old dormer windows in the roof are missing today. So next we have what is today known as the Henderson block, directly next to Greenfield's dry goods store. This slide shows a great example of how drastically a single block can change over a century. In the early AA line photograph on the left, this section of East High Street was just a row of modest frame houses, home to businesses like J.E. Page's Grocery and a little tobacco and oyster shop further down. In 1892, these structures were torn down and replaced by the three-story Henderson block, shown here in the middle photo by J.M. Cho. These large brick buildings contain storefront on its ground floor and apartments up top. So fast forward to the modern photo today, you can see how the block looks, and including some significant 21st century changes to its facade. So moving on to this streetscape captured by AA line, this photo shows East High Street around 1875. On the far left is the home of merchant Diller J. Leidick, followed by Henry Saxton's hardware store, and then the prominent Bounce House Hotel. This hotel was a significant piece of local history. Frederick Douglass stayed here in 1872 during a visit to town, and it eventually became the Florence House in 1881, and then the Hotel Wellington in 1891. So if you glance at the contemporary photo on the right, you can see that the architecture is still instantly recognizable, particularly the observation tower. However, that tower was actually removed for decades after it was removed in the 20th century, and then a major architectural restoration project in the 80s, they added the observation tower back on the building to give it back its original character.
Is that the first block?
That is the first block, yeah. So the house on the far left is what is now Creativepalooza.
And that, I don't recognize the white building.
That's just on the first block of East High Street. So the bricks on this building at the corner of Irvine Row and East High Street hide a pretty incredible structure built before the Revolutionary War. It's actually a two-story stone house measuring 60 feet wide by 30 feet deep, and you can actually see the original west wall of that building exposed in the photo. Back in the 18th and early 19th centuries, the building housed a tavern and a store. Then in 1831, a surveyor named John Harper bought the property, and by 1835, he had built the row of brick homes in the alley that are still standing today. It was originally known as Harper's Row in the 1800s, though today we know it as Irvine's Row. So this specific photograph was taken between 1912 and 1915 by AA line. At that time, it housed Miniam's Music House, the Singer Sewing Machine Store, and Sipes Pharmacy. So this incredible photo on the left was taken by Charles Lockman in 1861, when Henry Glass was in charge of the Washington Hotel on West High Street. If you look closely at the background of Lockman's photo, you can see scaffolding encasing the tower of St. John's Episcopal Church while their new spire was being built. Shortly after this photo was taken, the hotel in the foreground was destroyed in a fire. Now, if you look at the modern comparison on the right, you'll notice that you can no longer see St. John's at all, even though I took the contemporary photo from the exact same angle as Lockman. That's because the tower of First Presbyterian Church hadn't yet been built in 1861, meaning Lockman had a completely uninterrupted view across the lawn to see St. John's. This is a very early view of Carlisle, and one that highlights how the layout of the square has evolved since the 19th century. This is one of my favorite photos. So this is an AA line photo that shows the train coming down West High Street. To the right, you can see several buildings. First is the Stewart Building, which at that time was occupied by the Carlisle Post Office. And next to that is the Carlisle Herald newspaper office, followed by Stambaugh's menswear store. And further down, on the opposite side of North Pitt, you can see the Cumberland Valley Railroad Station. In 1908, this block was purchased by a man named W.L. Michelow. The following year, Michelow started an extensive remodel to raise these buildings so that they'd match the height of the brand new Orpheum Theater next door. The Stewart Building and Stambaugh's clothing store were raised from 3 stories to 4, and the Herald office required 2 entire additional stories. Now take a look at the modern view. You can still see the triangular window cornices of the Stewart Building, and if you look closely enough, you can even spot the difference in color between the bricks of the original building and that 4th floor that they added in 1909. So, you can see it there, yeah. Now, here's a photo of the same block after that construction, and this was also taken by AA Line. You can see how much more imposing the block looks here in the 1920s compared to that earlier shot. If you look to the far right, you can see the arched entrance of the Orpheum Theater that opened in 1909. On the far left, running along North Pitt Street, is the Strand Theater. And down in the bottom corner of that slide, I've included a modern view so you can see how the intersection looks today. Notice how the building abruptly cuts off right where the Orpheum once stood? That's because the theater was destroyed in a fire in 1939, and that fire also damaged what was previously known as the Stewart Building, leaving only half the building standing. So what I really love about this specific era of the block is the snapshot it gives us of everyday life. The ground floor of the Bolin Building was a massive hub for downtown. Right on the corner, you can see the Sugar Bowl Candy Company, and further down, you can see the signs for the Coney Island Quick Lunch, the New Way Restaurant, and the Dixonian Cafe. Now let's take a look at a specific intersection that captures the changing landscape of Carlisle, the northwest corner of West High and Pitt Streets. AA Line photographed this corner several times throughout his career. At the top center photo, you can see the original stone houses built in the 1750s for a shopkeeper named Elizabeth Ross. By the late 1800s, when this photo was taken, the Adams Express Company was using the building, and Otis F. Connolly's Tobacco and Cigar Shop was just 3 doors down to the left. In 1891, that colonial landscape vanished to make way for the new Cumberland Valley Railroad Station, which you can see in the photo on the bottom right. This station completely changed the feel of the block, and by 1900, several modern 3-story buildings had popped up, replacing those older 2-story houses that we see in the earlier photo. So this picture here is an example of that. In the top right-hand corner is the photo that AA Line took during Old Home Week. And in Carlisle, it shows Otis Connolly's new, larger storefront on West High Street. And to the right of the building, you see the corner of the Seaview Railroad Station. Connolly's Cigar Shop is still standing and now houses 113 Social. So now the mid-20th century brought another huge shift as trains gave way to cars and the railroad station was torn down around 1939. By 1940, a Gulf service station was built in its place, which you can see in the bottom center image. That gas station stuck around until 1981, when it was demolished to build a Sheetz convenience store. That Sheetz has since moved on as well, so today it's a parking lot. This single corner is a perfect example of what Sidewalks Through the Centuries is all about, seeing how the spaces we walk past every day constantly reinvent themselves over time. Now let's look at Denny Corner on West High Street, a plot of land that connects Carlisle's frontier days straight to the campus of Dickinson College. Long before it was a college landmark, this site was lot number 5 in the original 1751 Carlisle Plan of Lots. It was granted to a merchant named John Smith. In 1790, He sold the lots to a blacksmith named Simon Boyd. And if you look at the top two photos, you can see the old Boyd complex. These views look down Northwest Street toward West High Street, capturing how the corner looked when it was still a busy network of early log homes, workshops, and stables. In 1833, the property was sold to Harmar Denny of Pittsburgh and was eventually donated to Dickinson College by the Denny family. Ground was broken for the original Denny Hall in April 1895, opening formally in June of 1897. So you can see that beautiful original stone structure in the large photograph on the far right here. However, that original building didn't last long. If you look at the small photo in the center, it captures the devastating 1904 fire that gutted the building. Just below that, the final image shows the rebuilt Denny Hall, complete with its brand clock tower, a familiar sight for anyone who has walked by the college campus. So let's turn to the southeast corner of North Hanover and Lowther to trace the history of the current North Hanover Grill building. On the far left, you see the buildings around the late 19th century when it housed the C. Shapley Furniture Rooms, a local business operated by the Shapley family for nearly 80 years. It closed in 1924 upon the death of its remaining proprietor, Harry L. Shapley. Following the store's closure, the building transformed into a restaurant hub. The middle image shows the iconic Famous Texas Lunch, which opened in 1925 and operated here for decades, acting as an impactful stepping stone for several Greek immigrants who went on to launch their own area eateries. After a period in the 1980s as a Lone Star Tavern, the property evolved into the North Hanover Grill we see on the far right, showing over a century of continuous commercial life. So let's move to 19 North Hanover Street to look at a storefront that rapidly evolved to keep up with downtown trends. On the far left, you see the building around 1900 when it housed Bainey, Snyder, and Stecker, a carpet and dry goods store. If you look in the middle photo, the storefront completely changed in February 1913 when it opened as the Home Theater, Carlisle's very first moving picture house. Just 2 years later, in 1915, Bowman and Company took over and radically altered the architecture again, as shown in the third photo. They stripped away the classic bay windows and installed massive sheets of glass to create a bright, modern daylight store. As you can see in the small color inset on the right, that exact 1915 department store facade is how the building still stands on North Hanover Street today. So let's turn to the public square to explore a site that has been the civic and commercial heartbeat of Carlisle since the town's very beginning, the Carlisle Market House. A market house was first established on the southeast corner of the square way back in 1751. If you look at the images across the top and far right, you can see what those early open-air market days looked like, packed with horse-drawn wagons and crowds of vendors. The market buildings went through a few iterations. One was destroyed by a storm in 1836 and rebuilt the following year. Then in 1878, the town constructed a much taller, highly ornamental brick market house, which you can see in the two lower left-hand photographs. It featured distinct towers and served the community until 1952 when it was demolished. Finally, in the center photo, you can see what ultimately became of the site. In 1960, the cornerstone was laid for the Cumberland County Courthouse, which still anchors the southeast corner of the public square today. So this is the Second Presbyterian Church of Carlisle, which had two buildings at this corner. It was established first on this corner in 1833. The Congregation of Second Presbyterian Church purchased the property and erected their first church, which you can see in the top center photo with its classic column facade. So this is the first church. By 1870, the building needed repairs and the congregation decided to demolish it and build a new one on the site. As you can see in the bottom right photo, this new structure was much different in architectural style than the previous church. This stone Gothic church stood for 100 years until 1970, when the congregation broke ground for their new church on Garland Drive. And the dramatic crane photo at the bottom, which was captured by local photographer Jim Bradley, shows the demolition of that 1870 church happening just a couple years later. If you look at the middle color photo, the Salvation Army now occupies that corner today. We're almost at the end. So now let's explore the Ramsey House, a 2-story weatherboarded building on the southeast corner of South Hanover and Chapel that had an incredible history. During the Revolutionary War, British Major John Andre and Lieutenant Despard were kept as prisoners in Carlisle and lodged at Stewart's Tavern across the alley from the Ramsey House. When a group of local militiamen surrounded the tavern, swearing that they would have Andre's blood, Mrs. Ramsey famously came out of her house and brandished her broom at the men until they left. If you look at the top right photo and middle left photos taken around 1900 by A.A. Line, the building was in the process of demolition by its owner, McClellan Zinn. Zinn is actually pictured on the right of that top photo. Stripping away the exterior siding revealed something amazing. Shown in the exposed timber photo in the center, the original log structure underneath, that which Christopher Brandon had kept as a tavern all the way back during the French and Indian War era. While the Ramsey House on the immediate corner was ultimately replaced by the brick apartment building we see in the modern color photo here, McClellan Zinn's farming implement store, shown in the lower left-hand photo, was built just behind the house and remains standing today.
Excuse me, what street is that on?
This is on South Hanover Street.
And Chapel Alley.
On the east side.
So for my final slide, we'll look at the Farmers and Drovers Hotel on the southeast corner of South Hanover and South Streets. Built around 1839 by General Samuel Alexander, this site was a bustling center for regional commerce. The 1885 photo on the far left by A.A. Line shows the building when it was called the Miller House. Following its purchase by Henry Gotworth in 1895, it became the Farmers and Drovers Hotel, shown in the center photo by Charles Francis Himes. It was an incredibly popular stop for traveling stockmen, frequently hosting livestock and horse auctions. By 1921, the hotel was sold to the Harris Motor Company, but after bankruptcy, the site was redeveloped into the brick building that stands today. Completed in March 1923, it featured a ground floor auto showroom and upper floor apartments. The modern photo on the right shows you how the corner looks today. While the livestock auctions and car dealerships are long gone, the space has remained a local staple as Bay's Country Kitchen since 1973. So that brings us to the end of our presentation today. I hope Sidewalks Through the Centuries gives you a new perspective of how Carlisle has changed over time. Thank you all so much for your time today.